A verdict on the charge that Israel's committing genocide against Palestinians in Gaza is expected later on Friday. The case was brought before the International Criminal Court by South Africa. A panel of 17 judges in The Hague will decide. The case includes a call for an immediate ceasefire. Hamas has stated this evening it would honour such a ruling if Israel does the same. Let's bring in, for more analysis of this story, Yossi Mekelberg, Associate Fellow at the Middle East North Africa Programme at Chatham House, joining us live from London. Yossi, always a pleasure having you with us. Nobody, let's get this out and plain, nobody can condone or justify the terror act of Hamas on October the 7th. Okay. What is your sense about this case, about where this case goes, this genocide case at the International Criminal Court?
Good evening. Yes, 7th of October can be, of course, forgotten, but we are 3.5 months later, and the goalpost in many ways shifted quite a lot. And now we have this case, and by tomorrow around noontime we'll hear what the ICJ has to say. Now, the question that for the ICJ is to decide, first, it's not a verdict as such, because this might take years. It's just the beginning. It's whether there is evidence enough to ask, or for the ICJ to actually call for a ceasefire. Now, we might argue that there is a reason to call for a ceasefire regardless if the ICJ actually thinks that there might be a case of genocide or not. Israel said it's not the case. It's even released today apparently 30 orders for its defense team to use in this case to show that there was no intention. And of course, it will stand or fall in the case of intention, because as you said, there are already more than 25,000 Palestinians killed in this war. Most of them are civilians. So what will happen tomorrow will decide. But it's, by the way, there is a range of measures that the ICJ can decide, from actually call for a ceasefire all the way to more rebuke in Israel, call Israel to allow more humanitarian aid, ask Israel to stop incitement to genocide, as was the case with some politicians. So this is the question, what is going to decide. One important point here is that it will be decided by a majority. You don't need a consensus of all of the judges.
So out of the 17 judges assessing this, it's about a majority. This whole question, Yossi, brings great passions out, whichever side of the equation you find yourself on, and very few people, it seems, find themselves right in the middle. But if you read the history of what has gone on in the Middle East, going back over 100 years, one could make the case that it's been an aim to push out the Palestinians, even going back before the Balfour Declaration in 1917. There's been this idea, which some people say is an example of a kind of planned genocide.
I think at the end of the day, there was a decision in 1947 for the partition plan, Resolution 181, which should have established two states, the Israeli Jewish state and a Palestinian state. This never happened. And I think at the end of the day, it's this conflict moved in different direction, most of them not in the good or right direction, sometimes like in the case of the Oslo Accords, an attempt to bring peace. At the end of the day, yeah, we can go to the history all the way back to the Balfour Declaration, even before, with the rise of the Zionist movement. But the question that we're actually facing right now, whether a two-state solution, the one that recognizes the right of both people for self-determination, is going to be respected. There is a Jewish state, this is Israel, but there is no Palestinian state. And this is the missing part in this jigsaw. In the meantime, the result of the failure to deal with the root causes of the conflict brings again and again this kind of situation we see now. My fear, I must admit, that the ICJ might be a distraction actually from the very fact, A, that a ceasefire is needed urgently because of the level of destruction and death we see right now in Gaza, with probably no aim and can go on for months, no end. And the thing is also distract with actually the need to concentrate on a political solution, which, whatever is the history, to ensure that it doesn't repeat itself, and what we see now will never happen again.
Completely hearing what you're saying, and it's worth pointing out as well, of course, that the Jewish people were the victims of an actual genocide at the hands of the Nazi Germans during the Second World War. Just reminding people that we're trying to keep this as balanced as we can in terms of how we're looking at this whole argument. You mentioned there about the feeling of this being a distraction. There is a policy, of course, with the current government in Israel that there is no idea, no concept of a two-state solution now, this being the most far-right Israeli government since the creation of the state post-Second World War. Is that the problem, do you think? Israel today is too extreme?
There is no doubt about it. I think one of the main problems is actually Netanyahu being for way too long in power, and actually the entire Israeli society became almost willingly hijacked by Netanyahu's greed to stay in power for so long, and also to stay in power in order to possibly stay out of jail because of his corruption trial that is still actually being deliberated. Now, in order to do that, he is the one that legitimized the very far right in Israel. It was his messianic, religious, ultra-nationalistic parties that are part of the government now. And Israel was in a crisis, political crisis, social crisis, even before 7th of October. And I think at the end of the day, the failure, again, to resolve the conflict, the Palestinians, the building of the settlements, the harshness of the occupation, the blockade of Gaza, no vision of a two-state solution to a large extent brought us into this place. Again, as you said at the beginning, by no means this justified what Hamas did, but at the same time, when conflicts are not resolved in a way that is satisfactory to anyone, it empowers the most extremists in the conflict.
Indeed, just echoing the words of Antonio Guterres of the UN, he said that it didn't happen in a bubble. There are reasons why it happened, and all these things kind of like roll up into this whole big effect, which exploded into the horrific things that happened on October the 7th. I'm left with the question, Yossi, I'm sure you can't answer it. How long can the killing continue, though? We're at 25,900 or more who've been killed so far on the Palestinian side. How much longer can this be allowed to continue?
In my mind, it shouldn't take place even 1 day longer. I think we need to go into a political solution. Israel needs to recognize that its unrealistic military objectives are not going to be achieved in terms of destroying Hamas, whatever it means. And actually, it's on a losing path in terms of the sympathy and the empathy that the world sensed back in October 7. But I think the key is in the international community. The key for stopping the war is with the United States, to part also with the Israeli society, to recognize that there is no victory in the sense that Netanyahu is rhetorically is claiming time and again. And it has to go into making sure that the hostages are released. This should be part of a victory, ensuring that Hamas is not in control of Gaza and moving into a political process. But again, I think to a large extent, we need to look at the international community, and this is Washington, I think the Europeans, not only to put pressure, but also passing a resolution in the Security Council for a ceasefire.
Yossi Mekelberg, Associate Fellow of the Middle East and North Africa Programme at Chatham House. Thank you, as always, for your time and your analysis. We appreciate it. Thank you very much, Yossi.